Hi team, so today we're going to talk about why I think most warm-ups in class suck and also why I don't want you to get those warm-ups, those exercise portions in class confused with the type of exercise that you will be doing in the gym. So one of the concerns that I get and that I've seen from quite a few people is that they just hate those warm-ups, especially certain types of warm-ups that I'm going to talk about in a moment. So when they think about doing additional exercise, they're like, I already fucking hate going and doing those warm-ups. I don't want to do any more in the gym as well, okay? So we sometimes call these people purple belts, I guess, but essentially we do those warm-ups, they're pretty tough usually, maybe we don't enjoy them quite as much as we could, and so we don't want to be replicating that in the gym. That's good because that's not what you would be doing in the gym. Now there's two types of warm-ups, and I'm going to say just in a general grappling school. Now if your school doesn't fall into one of these warm-ups, then fair play to your coach, they're probably doing something a little bit more constructive with their warm-ups. But we either get the boredom warm-up or the deaf warm-up, okay? So let's talk about the boredom warm-up first. This is basically the same kind of routine every single class, run around the mat for a little bit, zigzag, go to the end of the mat, make 2 lines, shrimp down the mat, hip escape down the mat, maybe do some crawl down the mat, do some sprawls down the mat, a series of like what's dressed up as sport specific movements going up and down. Now correct me if I'm wrong, but for most people this is what it's like. It's either a race against your training partner down the mat, so there's not really much thought going into the actual form, or you just zone out. And if you guys ever been in that situation where you're like watching TV or especially like reading a book and you kind of get to the end of a page, you think, I actually didn't really read that page, like I kind of read it but I didn't absorb it, and you have to go back and reread it. This is time and time again what I see with people when they're doing warm-ups. So technically they're doing a sprawl down the mat, but they're not really thinking about that sprawl, where their feet are, where their hips are, where their weight distribution is. Could they have stopped the takedown? It's just, oh, I've got to do 10 of these down the mat until we can get to the fun part of the class. So what really is sacrificed is what I would call the quality of movement. So rather than kind of doing a movement which could actually be useful if performed correctly, it's kind of being done out of context. And this is where we get into this kind of sport-specific fallacy, really, where most coaches will say, well, those warm-up movements are absolutely essential. They're foundational movements of grappling. And they're right, but they're wrong at the same time. So let's just take, for example, a sprawl. When we do a sprawl is a reactive movement to defend against a takedown. So we have somebody coming at us with their full body weight as a takedown, and we're going to be responding by doing the sprawling movement. Now, if that was set up as a drill where we were being preemptive and we were waiting for that takedown and then we were starting to sprawl out from it, that would hopefully form the right kind of mental and physical connections. Whereas if I'm just sprawling down the mat, unless my brain is really switched on, I'm not really doing the same thing. Number one, nobody's trying to take me down, so there's nothing that I'm cueing off of except for my own movement. And number two, without the fear of being taken down, or actually the fear of failing that sprawl and being taken down, I can kind of sprawl however I want, whatever speed. If I'm a bit fatigued, or I'm a bit lazy, or I'm chatting to the guy in the queue next to me, maybe I'm not doing that movement with real quality. Also, if coaches just either taking part in the warm-up, involve themselves, or they're just standing off the mat, looking at their phone or chatting to senior belts, they might not be able to see exactly what you're doing. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this is all coaches, this is some coaches, okay? There are some amazing coaches out there that are going to be watching every move that you make, but they're probably not going to be sending you through repetitive warm-ups like this. The issue again, guys, is that unless our mind is connected to the movement, it's not going to be that kind of transferable into other things that we're doing. So that's what I'd call like the boredom warm-up. You go through series of movements you've done a million times before, you're not really thinking about it, you're just using it to gradually get the body warm and move on to the next phase. The other type of warm-up that we fall into, and hand up here for being guilty of kind of doing this when I was a little bit more of a novice coach, is what I would call like the deaf warm-up. So this normally happens when, and this was a situation I was in where my coach used to say to me, Tom, do you want to do the warm-up today? I just think, amazing. This is my perfect opportunity to show everyone how fit I am and to grind everybody into dust. So I'm sure you've done these warm-ups before. It's kind of like being in some sort of like military boot camp, where now instead of warming up, you're basically doing exercises reps to 1,000,000 and you feel like you're going to be dead in about 5 minutes. So again, this is probably not the most effective way to warm up the body, and certainly I used to relish the fact that I could make people work super hard, and it wasn't until later on I realized that it just wasn't particularly productive. So this is the kind of warm-ups where you're doing jumping jacks, push-ups, jump squats, tuck jumps, just on repeat, So maybe these aren't even sport-specific movements, but you're just doing them to fatigue yourself and to see, who the toughest guy in class is, or at least who the fittest guy is. So what does a good warm-up look like in my opinion? Okay, so I would say that we should be doing some type of movement which gradually warms the body up, but also has some sport-specific carryover if it was done in the context of class. So the way that I would normally like to do this is I would like to do a pulse raiser, so something that just gets the heart rate gradually up and it lifts us out of a rested or sort of homeostatic state into, okay, I'm preparing my body for exercise. So an example of what this could be if we were doing this in class with a partner could be something like a pummeling drill or something along those lines where we gradually raise up our heart rate. I would then take a little segue out and do a mobilization. Now, a mobilization doesn't need to be an extensive stretching routine, and we'll discuss this in another video, but a mobilization just means that some of the key areas of the body, like the neck, the shoulders, the back, the hips, knees, are just essentially warmed up to the point where they're going to be a little bit safer for when we start our exercise. After that, then what I'd like to do is move into sport-specific movements. One of my favourite things to do here is to practice takedowns, gradually ramping up the intensity. This allows us to execute a technique against a partner. Because it is a takedown and it's against a partner, it does need to be executed with a degree of finesse in order to, one, take our training partner down, but also to do it safely and effectively. The training partner gets to fall and get back up from the ground. That's allowing them a degree of continuing to raise their heart rate. And we're working a technique. I think this is one of the best ways to warm up, guys. Of course, it could be like a guard pass, it could be a submission drill, but the takedown, allowing us to transition from the floor and back up again, is very good for keeping the heart rate up and keeping warm. And also, it's not something that we can do in a mindless way very easily. We need to be considered, and the two training partners training together will then both be practicing technique and getting their body warm and prepared at the same time. So, how this could look for you, just generally, when we're in the gym, will be slightly different to warming up for class. So hopefully that gives you some clarity of how I would take the approach to warming up for class. In the gym, you might not be throwing your training partner around. So what I would say is to go through a similar format of a pulse raiser, a mobilization, and then I would be moving into my initial activity. What I'm going to do today, guys, is I'm going to give you 3 mobility drills that I think are 3 of the most effective for quickly and effectively warming up your body. You could do these pre-class, you could do these pre-home exercise, you could do these pre-gym exercise. Now, they're not an extensive mobility session, but if you had limited time and you wanted to get your body mobile and ready to train, these would be the 3 to do. The first mobility drill will be a lunge of a twist. This will help mobilize the ankle, knee, hip, and the added rotation will also help the trunk of the body and the spine. You can perform this off both sides, and we also get the added benefit of working on our balance and our proprioception as well. The next mobility drill I call the cat-cow plus. So this is often referred to as the cat-cow in yoga, and it's essentially a spinal flexion and extension. This is one of the most important stretches pre-lifting, as we're usually loading the spine. This will allow us to stay mobile in the trunk of the body. I like to add sitting back towards my heels, which also mobilizes my knee, ankle and foot joints, and it adds an extra dimension to the stretch. Depending on your mobility, you will also get a stretch up in the upper body, in the lats and the shoulders. All round, this is probably my favourite stretch to perform before doing any sort of weight training. Our final mobility drill is the hinge with added shoulder roll. So to start this drill, we're going to do a hinge of the bar. This is replicating movements like the deadlift, and it's going to start to mobilize the lower back and the hamstrings. The added shoulder roll at the top is going to take our shoulders through a full range of circumduction. It's going to start to warm up the shoulder joint and prepare us for upper body push and pull exercises. This is also a great deal to test your current shoulder mobility and flexibility levels.